Welcome to episode 2 of season 3 of Matire Gemi, a bi-weekly podcast where we help you learn the Kikuyu culture, history, and heritage in English and in a fun, light-hearted way. I'm Jerry Wadiho Nademojiro Wabareyakihara, your anchor. And as always, I'm joined by Wayaki Wageshaga and Kingori Wakanyi. Today's episode is a special one. And it's special because it is the first time we introduce a Kikuyu heroine to you. This legend that we'll be talking about was born in the 1850s, and she lived a good life until the 1920s. And this heroine that we're talking about is and has been a controversial figure. But the fact that she's a controversial figure doesn't change the fact that she was a glass ceiling breaker. She was a magnificent woman that made people uncomfortable. So with that, lean in and indulge in the delicious story of none other than Wangû wa Makeri. Well, welcome, Wayaki and Kingori. So before we go further, Wayaki, let's start with you introducing yourself.
Oh, thanks, Njeri. My name's Wayaki Wageshaga. Geshanga was born by Wayaki Vedeu. Wayaki Vedeu was born by Higa. Higa was born by Wayaki Wahiga. And those are my most recent ancestors, and they go all the way to Gikuyu and Mobi. I belong to the Ashera Abaria Muturi clan, and I am happy to be here to continue this journey.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm really happy that you're here too. Kingori, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jerry. Oyo ne Kingori Wakanyi, moboi wa bare ya marigo, wa gethaku kia maito nyabura. Marika mawathani, I am Wangi, Mushere ne maina, and we hail from Nyeri, Tetu, and it shows the Nijugaga Nidayo.
Wonderful. You know, today we are talking about our first heroine, right? And so I would like to kick it over to you, Wayaki, and ask you, who are we talking about today? And why are we talking about her today as a heroine?
So today we're talking about Wangû wa Makeri. Wangû wa Makeri is a historical figure, a lady who was born in the 1850s. And the reason we're talking about her is because she was the precursor and inspiration for a lot of our Kenyan female leaders today. Leaders such as, Mother Kaome, who is the Chief Justice, first woman Chief Justice of Kenya, Wagarewa Maathai, who we may talk about in future episodes, or who we will talk about in future episodes, and some of the freedom fighters that were in the women's regiment during the freedom struggle, I want to believe did get some inspiration from Wangû wa Makeri.
Thank you so much for that. And so maybe I'll ask you as well, Kingori, because this woman is a legend. But at the same time, this woman has had a very controversial story, right? So as we come in here and we're featuring her as our first heroine, why is she a magnificent heroine for us to talk about?
Well, you're right. Her story is kind of checkered with a few controversial things that are happening around her. And so someone from a different lens may wonder, is this really the best of the Kikuyu women we had at that time? What I can say is that once we get into understanding who she was, especially as an administrator and her capacity, it will be very clear that this is someone who should be looked up to for their effectiveness. However, what we tend to see, and I'm sure Oyaki is going to get right into this because it's central to her story, is perhaps some layered storytelling in our psyche that kind of juxtaposes not just her, but a story of a previous Wangû, an actual Mudhamaki from the ancient Kikuyu society. So who is really said to have been this despotic leader or iron fist leader who people feared and perhaps dealt deadly blows to many a man.
And you know what's so interesting about what you just said, King Ori, is the fact that we already see that in the popular narrative, and Wayaki will talk about it, I'm sure, right? Almost like you said, a juxtaposition of different Wangûs kind of blended into one story, right? So I think the thing that we have to look at is that some stories have a lot of truth in them, but there also could be some exaggeration to make some stories come alive. So when we keep that in mind, and we keep in mind that everybody has rounded perspectives, some strengths and some weaknesses, including myself, including Wayaki, including King Ori, then we recognize that we have to look at our heroines and our heroes and really recognize the impact they are having, right? And they had on our legacy, on us as the Agikoyo. So with that said, Wayaki, who is this woman? Maybe take us in from the beginning. Who is Wangû Makeri?
To kind of paint a picture that is hardly ever painted when we hear about Wangû Makeri, I'm going to read an excerpt from a book that was written by a lady called Mary Wanyoike. And I will leave a link to this book in the show notes for anyone who wants to buy the book. It is available. So,
okay.
From the beginning. So, Wangû Makeri was born around 1856 to Atueka Masharia and Wakero Wagetie village of Getie village, Kagema division, Murang'a district. Born at the time when Gikuyu traditions were hardly diluted by external forces such as the Western education and Christianity, Wangû underwent all the traditional rites of passage. When she was about 6, she underwent the ear-piercing ceremony. I'll pause there because as I read this excerpt, it has a lot of cultural significance and ties that we have mentioned in previous episodes in Season 1, Season 2. I know King Ori mentioned about Gutonywa Dogera or Guturua Dogera in Season 1, which was a rite of passage when we were talking about the stages
of life.
Life of a Mogikoyo. And so after the ear-piercing ceremony, she graduated from childhood to girlhood. After that ceremony, the society expected her to be able to distinguish between right and wrong, good and evil. The ceremony also prepared her for the more important rite of initiation, or what we call circumcision, when she would achieve adult status and take full responsibility of her actions. I know maybe King Ori, you want to say something about initiation, because we talked about it in depth, but that was one of the main purposes. It was a movement from going from childhood, and now you are considered an adult who was responsible, who could distinguish between right and wrong.
Yeah, and before King Ori speaks, I'm just going to add that for anybody who wants to delve into the 9 stages of life of a Mogikoyo man or woman, right, in that pre-colonial period, go to Season 1, and the episode is called The Life of a Mogikoyo. And Wayaki and King Ori really go into depth on that. So, King Ori, back to you.
Well, I think what we're being told at this stage is that this is a woman who could embodied the Gemi Shiodeinya Shia Moiretu, meaning that she now had transitioned into her own being, having gone through Iruarea Omo, na Iruarea Kahio Omo. Remember, we could talk about that's the being prepared for the rest of your life by going through Irua at the level of the mind, going through a transformation into being an adult. So this is a woman who hither to this point had gone through all Ogekoyo steps, and so was seen as as Mogekoyo as it comes, as Mogekoyo as Jahe.
Actually, you talking about that made me realize one thing, that we were metaphysical in our in how we lived life, because Iriwareaomo is the mental and spiritual planes of existence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I just connected the dots right there, which is very interesting.
I loved it. I did love seeing your face connecting those dots. All right.
Thanks. So, where was I? So, we were talking about the ceremony of Irua, which would help young men and young women move on to the next stage. So, meanwhile, through listening and observation, Wago learned domestic chores, weeding, fetching firewood, and fetching water. So this was before there was formal schooling. So the Mogekoe would teach their children, and we've talked about this, through observation, through house chores of outside the homestead, and so on. In the evenings, she sat around the hearth to listen to stories told by her mother or her grandmother. She was a keen listener of these stories, and especially the hero stories. So even back then, as kids, would still be excited about superheroes, like today. Yeah, so Wago was especially captivated by stories about Gikuyu warriors who successfully raided Maasai herds.
Ooh, so she was
When she grew up-
destined, right? She was almost destined for what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
She was putting that in her subconscious mind. She grew up at some point and into a beautiful maiden who was admired both by her peers and many a man. One man described her as thus: she had a strong, well-built figure, her face was smooth and tender, and her color was neither black nor brown. Her eyes were bright, informative, and appealing, while her nose, long and thin-looking, just in the right proportion to the rest of her face. She was slim and tall like Jerry. And
she
her
was a
proportional
supu.
legs. She was a supu. And her proportional legs were long and straight. They called her a boy's killer.
Wow. Boys killer. So far, there's a lot of checked boxes there. Mesema alikuwa chocolate color. And the nose was contoured.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she had those long mosquito legs.
Yeah, definitely like Kikuyu beauty.
Yeah, kabisa. Yet, it was not just physical beauty that earned her the admiration of many. Wangû was also courageous, diligent, sociable, and hospitable. During the weeding season, she actively participated in the guatio organized by her peers. I don't know if you guys know what guatio is.
Remind us.
So back in the day, we didn't have any tractors or earth movers to help us till the land. We used to use what we called muro, or a djembe to till the land.
Mm-hmm.
And so one way to be efficient was, Jerry, if you had your piece of land here and Kengori was next to you and I was next to Kengori, we would decide, hey, today we are going to till your land, and then tomorrow we'll till mine, and then the next day we'll till Kengori's.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it was sort of a community service where you came together, you finished one's land, plot of land, planting or weeding or doing whatever, and then you moved on to the next one. And so it was really good to. It was just coming together to help each other in work.
I love that.
It reminds me of that word. It reminds me of that word kwegwatia or kogwata. Looks like it's the same word. So if you don't want to do something, you kwegwatia. Maybe you're
Exactly.
maybe you're saying you need some help or something like that, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's
Actually, I
even...
never thought about it like that. Go ahead, Jerry.
No, I was going to say, there's even this saying, and I might say it wrong, it's a proverb. We say, kamuige koyaga dire.
Dire.
Yeah, dire.
Dire.
Right,
Dire.
right? Which is translated like really loosely into many hands make light work. So that's what they
right.
were doing, right?
That's what they were doing. Kabisa. You've hit the nail on the head. So when she was of age, Wangû was lined up for the rite of initiation. And so, to put this in context, back in the day, this is before 1929, when initiation was abolished for women. So back in the day, it used to happen. And so since she had not been defiled, she did not have to go through any purification ceremonies. And this is something that we've possibly talked about in the Irua episodes, or maybe we didn't. But there was some purification that was done to men and women if they had gone through some issues, which we will not get into. So she did not have to go through the purification ceremony. She participated in the songs and the dances on the eve of the rite to underline her yearning for graduation to adulthood and her determination to endure and courageously go through the physical operation. Like her peers, she went for seclusion for 8 days. We talked about this in that episode of, or the episodes that we covered in initiation.
Yep.
And I don't know, Jerry, if you know the reason why it was 8 days. Do you remember?
I don't remember. Remind us.
Yeah, so the number 9 is a special number because it's the gestation period. It's when a child is born after 9 months. The gestation period of a lot of mammals is 9 months. We believe that if you do things for 8 days, on the 9th day, something new is going to happen. So that's why they were in the what we call the Kegada for 8 days, because on the 9th day is when they were reborn anew, right?
Beautiful.
So, we had talked about that, I think, in the episode on Irua. So I'll keep going.
Okay.
So hence, here they were tutored on the qualities of a good wife by their sponsors and the Women's Advisory Council, or what we call the Jamaya Tumia. And Kengori has talked about this, the Jamaya Tumia. So these teachings were usually reinforced by the mother after seclusion, right? So her mother would advise her and teach her things after that. Thus, in addition to instruction on sexual taboos, the girls were taught to be respectful and hospitable to their parents-in-law, to obey and feed their husbands well, and to be hospitable and pleasant to their husbands' age groups. After initiation, young unmarried men danced the Mushongwa. The Mushongwa is a very interesting song, and I'll actually include a link in the episode description. That, this song basically praised the good qualities of a woman, such as physical beauty, intelligence, and wisdom.
Ooh.
Right? So I'll include the song. There's a few on YouTube that I actually found that I will include.
And I love that because it's brains and beauty, right? It's both,
yes.
Right? Brains, beauty, and
package.
wisdom. Because even wisdom goes beyond brains, right? Goes beyond intelligence. I love that. Mm-hmm.
Wangû participated in these dances. Her appealing voice made her a popular soloist. Her amiable personality earned her the respect of very many. Consequently, she was invited to many gatherings. Among Wangû's secret admirers was Makeri wa Bogo. So, why we call her Wangû wa Makeri is because eventually she got married to Makeri wa Bogo. So where was her husband from? Where was her future husband from? He was from Koibe, just across the Kaguberi stream, which separates Getie and Koibe. So they were not from very far. Back in the day, there was no social media where you could swipe and see somebody in another state or in another country. It was, most people used to get married in the same sort of setting, right? In the same village or in the next one. So Makeri was a descendant of the Dorobo and belonged to the Edaga clan. We've talked about the Edaga clan in the past, Jerry. I don't know if you remember.
I absolutely remember the Edaga clan. They're the ones who have all these spiritual powers in overall. Yeah.
That is right. That is right. So Makeri Wabogo, he was a quiet guy, reserved and unambitious. He sought Wago's hand in marriage according to Kikuyu traditions. Apparently, and we've talked about this also. So apparently Wago was also attracted to Makeri, even though they had very striking differences. She was a personality. She was, she was a soloist. She had courage. He was very chill, and so they were, I guess, yin and yang. They were night and day in terms of personality. So it was known that Makeri was an only son and that his father had a large tract of land and lots of livestock. In hindsight, then, it is possible that Makeri's economic status in society tipped the balance in the decision for Wago to marry him.
Okay.
That wealth was significant in Kikuyu marriage is illustrated by the proverb, Nyarari ehitukagira dhome wagea. I don't know if you know what that means. Do you know what
Not
that means?
really, but I was just going to say wealth was significant back then. And
It's
the
still
reality is
significant
that
even
wealth
now.
is still significant, today,
It is. Yeah, I remember when I was growing up, my dad used to always tell me, "Muritu mudaka ageragira dhome wagea." Basically meaning that, you might not be of means, and when you're not of means is when an opportunity will come. And you're not able to take advantage of that opportunity or make hay while the sun is shining, so to speak. The Makeri-Wago marriage was organized and celebrated according to the Kikuyu customs of the marriage of a first wife. Hence, it went through all the important stages of courtship, payment of bridal wealth, gurario, and the slaughter of goimas to celebrate the occasions. Wago was then ambushed by Makeri's age mates and carried across Kaguberi stream to become his wife. Their marriage was blessed with 6 children before her appointment as headman of Wedaga location in 1901.
I love it. So now we've come to the moment in 1901 where she was appointed as a chief or a headman. I know I've seen both whenever I've read this story.
This is true, yes. So we'll pause here because this is the turning point. But, at this turning point, she already had a family. She had children. She was a member of the Kangei. And we talked about this in the stages of Amogikoyo. When a woman gets married, what stage she goes through, the Nyakenyua, Kangei, and so on. And so she reaches this stage, and then she's appointed to be the headman or the chief at that time, which was unheard of. In Kikuyu land.
That's a big deal, right? So of course I want to know
is a
how,
big deal.
right? I want to know how, but even before we talk about how, I love what you just said, and King Ori, you can add to this so we can hear you a little bit, but it's, the fact that she is appointed into this role in 1901. And while this role is controversial today, right, the reality is that by some point, our entire governance system had chiefs and headmen, right? But even at this point, there were not very many chiefs and headmen. So she managed to be appointed, and she was the first woman chief and probably only of the Agikoyo. So she sounds to me like she was a glass ceiling breaker. And that's a big deal, right? So Kengori, what are your thoughts so far? How are you reacting to her?
1901 is very early on in the colonial experience of Kenya. So it speaks volume, because this is at this time, Kenya has not even been declared a colony, right? So the folks who are operating within it, they're operating under the East African. There's a company that had been set up that was now kind of what was making inroads into the country. Mostly, the main issue here is trade. And missionaries are now very effective. So even this colonial chief system hasn't really doesn't have roots yet. It's all brand new, and that she was noticed and was seen as someone who could, take that role regardless of what we, the history tells us, shows of a lot of personal capacity. Because like we heard from Wayaki, that we're seeing an excellent upbringing, an excellent marriage life. This is not someone who's been educated, so to say, or Western educated. This is someone who is empowered by her own culture up until this point, and yet the colonial system sees her as exceptional, and they want to tap into it.
Yeah.
At this point, this is what happened. So Karoriwaga Kure, who is a famous paramount chief, was really good friends with Makeri Bogo, who was Wangû's husband. And he would come from time to time, and it was customary when a man came, he could be offered, I don't want to say refuge, I want to say hospitality by a man, by his wife taking care of him. So what that means is Karoriwaga Kure, being a paramount chief, would move around a lot. And so when he was in the area, he would stay at Makeri's house. Mm-hmm. And so he developed a friendship with Wangû Makeri, because she would see him from time to time. The controversial aspect of it is, or the controversial story, which we cannot prove, is some say that they had an affair. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, which was, to me, I would say it was an overblown story, because it wasn't unusual for a man who had one wife or two wives, if his friends came over, for them to be given hospitality by his first wife or second wife. It wasn't looked at in a negative way. In fact, there was a Muzungu who actually saw her and asked, whose wife is this? And Karori said that, claimed that Wangû was his wife. And after a few days, she was appointed to the position of chief or headman.
Oh, I love that. Area. There's a lot to be broken down here, right? Which is amazing. So first, yes. Story goes, and I like what you said, we can't prove or deny that she was having an affair with her husband's friend, Karori. Right? So, maybe talking to you, Kengori, maybe what's your input on that? Let's even assume she was having an affair. Let's just assume that, right? How did that play out in that time? Was that normal? Tell us more.
Yeah, this is where we have to be very careful how we, view things that happened in the pre-colonial Mogokoyo life. There is a very strict set of circumstances where this kind of relationship was permissible. And I don't want to get into the details of it, but it so did happen that if you were of the same rika with a particular gentleman, meaning you had gone through the Irua together, that you call each other wakine, you are kind of the same bands in a particular band of brotherhood, that in the right circumstances, you could develop a relationship with someone's wife. But I know it sounds super scandalous to us in today's life that would be permissible, but it did happen, and we would really need to look into the details of exactly how it happened, because these are not things that were very well documented because of their secret nature. But yes, it is possible that this is exactly what was going on between Chivugakure and Wangû Makeri. But we do know there was a very tight friendship. We do know that, we can assume there was a relationship going on there that was of a sexual nature. And for purposes of our story. Yes.
I love that. So it's either it was a very tight friendship, like Wayaki said, right? And then the story was blown up, or that there was an intimate relationship there, but also for us to remember not to judge that using today's Western lens and morality, right, that we've been taught today versus, thinking about what something like that potentially could have looked like and was voluntary across the board back then. So I love that. All right, Wayaki, let's keep going. So this colonialist guy comes and sees her. He sees something about her that clearly is attention grabbing. He asks, whose wife is she? Karori says, she's my wife, right? And next thing we know, a few days later, right, she's been crowned a chief. Did I summarize that really well, Wayaki?
You did, yeah. So, and Wangû's story, just to add another complex layer, is because, she's controversial because she had her supporters and she had her detractors, right? And like today's society, where you have a controversial subject or a controversial person, you're going to have, propaganda, you're going to have embellished stories, you're going to have some stories that, you may not believe. So take some of the stories that were said about her with a grain of salt. So what was her role as a chief? Mm-hmm. So she was the principal tax collector for her local area. So she acted as the go-between for the Kikuyus and their colonial authorities, under which, she became controversial because as you can imagine, in the 1900s, the Kikuyu man was self-sufficient. The Kikuyu woman was self-sufficient. They had their way of life. And now they were being introduced to things such as taxation. Taxation, they say taxation without representation.
Yeah.
And so she was controversial because she wasn't an enforcer. People say that she was very authoritative and she had ways and means to collect taxes, by force. They say that she had bodyguards and so on. People actually say some of the embellishments which have actually been refuted. People say that she would sit on the backs of men and hold counsel, which she would sit on backs of men as they knelt, and so that would make her very controversial. But people have actually refuted and said that was tongue in cheek. Basically, it's the way you'd say amekaliwa or this person. It was tongue in cheek. It wasn't literal, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I think that existed with a previous ruler of Agikoyo. Remember, when we talk about the sort of Ekoena Mobi and having 9 daughters or 9+ daughters, that there was a matrilineal system of Ogekoyo that even went into matriarchal society. Perhaps the chiefs and leaders of the Mogekoyo at that time were women. We do know for a fact that there were Gekoyo chiefs, Gekoyo rulers, Adhamaki. And one of them was Wangû. There's a book that used to be read by previous generations called Werute Godho Magekoyo. I don't remember which particular standard that was that we're talking about. But the story of a Wangû Makeri from the ancient times, and in this case, they still called her Wangû Makeri, but I think this is where the juxtaposition comes in. This is a different Wangû who was an actual chief, who is known to have been a very excessive as a chief. And the idea of sitting on the backs of men, it did exist in that previous pre-colonial era of Mogekoyo. And it did lead to the change of rulership. And actually that Wangû was not the only woman king. that existed.
And I think what I'm loving about this is how we're demystifying, and both of you are helping us break down some of these controversies in the story, where we're saying, listen, if we apply what we know, it allows us to question some of them. You know, like I love what you've said, Wayaki, that really was she sitting on people's backs? Well, the story is that it's more of it was like you said, tongue in cheek, right? She was strict, you know, umekaliwa, that kind of thing. And also the story you're bringing in, King Ori, where you're saying that it was more of, right, like people were juxtaposing a previous Wangû, who was a Mudhamaki from back in the day, right, and taking these two stories and conflating them, right? I really do love this clarity we're getting. And it's also interesting, if I could actually say this, right? So a lot of times we see that Wangû Makeri is clearly, you know, a glass ceiling breaker as we define it, meaning she's taking on a position that typically was not seen, right, for others like her at that point, you know, being a chief and having that enforcement over the entire community. But what's also interesting is that if you go back and look into history, right, whether you're looking at Wangari Maathai, or whether you're looking at people of any gender, right, that have had to break glass ceilings, it's often that their stories come with controversy, right? Because in order to break those ceilings, you ultimately make a lot of people very uncomfortable, right? So like you guys are saying, it makes sense to me, right, why her story could be shrouded with so much confusing controversy. All right, Wayaki, I'm loving this story. Keep going.
The controversies don't end. So,
There's more.
There's more, yeah. So it's told that, and you know, she ruled for a while, but it's told that at some point she had to step down from her chiefdom or her ruling position, and it's because she is said to have danced in a traditional only men's dance, which is called the Kibata.
What was the purpose of that dance?
It's a warrior dance, but it's a male only dance. And so what happened, or people say, there's conflicting stories here. So one of the controversial stories is that she saw Karuri dancing in that dance and she wanted to join in, and apparently her dress fell and she became naked in the dance. Some schools of thought actually dispute that, and at that point it was sort of an excuse for her to step down. She had so many detractors. A lot of men obviously did not want chiefs and to be particular a female chief collecting taxes or harassing them and so on, as the colonial chiefs would do, and so there was a lot of resistance to her, and so when this happened, she was forced to resign.
Okay, so I have to say something, right? So fast. Okay, I have to say that right now I'm really loving her because I'm feeling like she's so bold. She was like, I'm going to dance this dance, right? That takes another level of boldness. But the other thing, Wayaki, is right now I kind of really want to see the dance and what it looks like. Is there a way, do we have a link or something to show us what this Kibata dance looks like?
The Kibata, it's definitely on YouTube, so we'll post a link.
I can't wait to see it. Okay.
Yeah, and it may be something that we cover in future episodes, where there are so many traditional songs and occasions and their meanings that are very deep philosophy, something that we may cover in future episodes. But the Kibata is one of the dances that was a male-only dance, just like the Mushongwa was a female-only dance.
Yeah. Yeah, so I could imagine that if a man danced the Mushongwa, there would have been a lot of controversy as well, right?
Controversy, yes. This is true.
Yeah.
And even more so here, because we're talking about young men that are in their birthday suit. And then here comes a married woman. and joins in that dance. That is very, very controversial.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So she goes and she dances this controversial dance that really goes against our norms, right? And our traditions. So that's a big, right? She's really backed the system in a way. So then Wayaki, she at this point is forced to resign. Is that what I'm hearing?
It is forced to resign. As you know, we talked about Megiro back in season 1 or sometime in season 2. We talked about some of the things that are not, that men should not do, women should not do, children should not do, and so on. We talked about those things, and this was seen as one of those. And so as a result, she was pushed out of office.
And then what happened after that? Do we know anything else about her life, after that? Because, how long was she?
Yeah.
How long was she a chief? About how long?
It was about 10 years, actually, from 1901 to 1909.
I love that. And then what happened?
I mean, she was still a wife. She was still Makeri's wife. She was sort of ostracized after that. In fact, the book that I read the excerpt from says that she sort of was, even her co-wives, because Makeri ended up marrying 6 other women, I think 6 or 7 other women, kind of kept her at a distance. Because of course she was known to be an authoritative person, and she was a first wife, and so they kind of feared her, and so she lived out her life. I think she died in 1936, right? Yeah, 1930s. Yeah.
I love that. Kengori, are you aware of any of her legacy after, she resigned?
Yeah, and even before she resigned, she's known for, like I said, colonial works, right? So the building of roads. She's responsible for a lot of the things that happened in Murang'a area in location 10. This is now that area that we call Wedaga today. So a lot of development from then. I understand that her office is still there. You can still go there. There's some kind of a children's home today. She has even things named after her. I think Matiba had a company called Wangû company that was named after her, and that's I'm talking about our second liberation hero, Stanley Njido Matiba, who many of us know from the 90s and the 80s. Her legacy is secured. Everybody views her as someone who was efficient, someone who was a tough, no-nonsense administrator who contributed to what we may call the new Kenya in its construction. So that's how it's from that lens that we can see her as a hero. She has inspired many generations of women administrators, just like some of the people that Wayaki mentioned at the beginning, even today, to the reason that we have people like Chief Justice Martha Koome, people like opposition leaders like Martha Karua, and many, many others, Wangara Maathai. Those people will all attest that she definitely broke the ceiling for them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I even had seen somewhere where they talked about there was a certain location or sublocation, that area, right, in Murang'a had been renamed after her and in honor of her legacy, right, that those people think that much about her. I don't have the specifics, but I think I remember seeing that in a video where they were speaking up, right, about renaming the area around her. This is so beautiful. So I want to close by asking you a question. Actually, Wayaki, before I close by asking a question, any additional thoughts, anything else about her legacy?
No, she paved the way. She paved the way for a lot of our leaders today, especially our female leaders. She was the trendsetter, and that's her legacy.
Beautiful. I love it. So I'm going to put both of you on the spot, right? And I am going to ask you if there's one thing that for you is most memorable and admirable about Wangû Makeri? What is that? And I'm going to start with you, King Ori. When you think about this whole story and her legacy, and you think about something that's admirable about her, right? What would your closing statement be? What is that one thing that you say, ooh, she's admirable?
Well, first of all, anytime you have a beautiful woman who is smart, who is courageous, who is wise, who then goes ahead and achieves many things in her life, that is someone that everyone wants to take a look at again and say, wow, who's that, right? So she definitely was that person. She was a star in that way. The fact that she graced those controversies and still continued to be this leader, and it looks like she weathered all of that quite well, and ended up being someone that today everyone knows about, and she's still she's big in our imagination. She's a star. You cannot take that away from her. That's what comes to mind. And by the way, even after she left office, my understanding is that her son ended up becoming the chief of that area, still under the colonial system. So that means that she probably had some sway even after she left office.
Yeah. And I love that. And I'll share mine before we turn to you, Wayaki. And for me, I think I look at the word leadership, right? And I think about whether she was an effective leader or not. And at the end of the day, right, she had a task, just as every other chief had a task, right? And today we're not here to judge as to whether that task was good or bad. It was just the responsibility of the job description, right? And so what I see is that she was extremely effective at meeting and exceeding the responsibilities of her job description. So I think that really speaks to her capabilities, and she really showed us, and I think Wayaki, you had said this once before, she really showed us that leadership, right, that anybody can be a leader, that leadership is not gender neutral, and she opened those doors, right, to so many others, like you said like Matakome and Wangari Maathai, all of these people who speak of being inspired by her. So I love that about her. What about you, Wayaki?
Yeah, mine will be different. Despite the controversies in that plagued her as a leader, or the rumors, the propaganda, she was a good wife. She was a good mother. She had 6 children, and she helped Makeri expand his wealth. She was so hardworking that she helped him multiply his flocks. He bought more land and needed more hands, and brought him 7 wives, basically, to help with the daily tasks of expanding his empire. So she actually made him a king, so to speak. So her legacy might be controversial, but she was a good wife, she was a good mother, and she was a good Gada. People called her Gada. And Gada is, a respectable, honorable woman. And that's, to me, that's the legacy that she, apart from being a forebearer or precursor to all the women reps, the chief justices and so on, she was a family woman.
What a great woman. What a great hero. And it has been our joy sharing the legacy of this magnificent, admirable legend, Wangû Makeri. So Wayaki, who is our next hero? What's the next episode about?
On the next episode, we will be talking about Wangû Waihura.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody, and see you in exactly 1 week.